In this video, we're going to graph sine and cosine. When I do these types of graphs, I follow the same 5 steps. And to me, this is just the easiest way to do it. There may be some easier ways out there, but this is just a nice way of staying organized, to make sure that I have hit every one of my transformations. And it's a nice visual way to do it. This video is going to be particularly in radians. So it's obviously easy to convert it to degrees, or it's done the exact same way in terms of degrees when you see phase shift and all of that. So let's go ahead and just jump into our first example here. In this problem, they give us 3 times sine of 4 times theta minus pi over 2 plus 1. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my 5 simple steps. The first thing is I want to plot my midline. So I know that my midline is always the number that's adding or subtracting to my trig function. So I'm going to move my whole graph up 1, and I'm just going to draw my line in there. And that's my midline. My graph is going to be centered around the midline, so that's going to help me stay a little bit organized. Then I'm going to draw the amplitude lines. You don't have to do this. A lot of people probably don't. But again, it just helps me to stay organized. Now, your midline is always the number that is multiplying the trig function, and that tells us how far above the midline our maximums will be, and it tells us how far below the minimum, how far below the midline our minimums will be. So I'm going to be 1, 2, 3 above the midline, and I'm going to be 1, 2, 3 below. Okay? And so once we have this, my third step is I'm going to check to see if there's been a period change. And in this particular example, there has been. That 4 is going to change the period. Now, the period for any given function through sine and cosine is always going to be 2 pi or 360 degrees. Now, the number out there in the B spot is going to change the period. So I do 2 pi over B, and that gives me, pi over 2, okay? So what that means is we are going to repeat our pattern in the simple distance of pi over 2. Now, if this happens, and see, for example, my graph here, the scale down here at the bottom is a little short. I know that my period is going to be from here to here, meaning that's how quickly that I've got to have my maximum and my minimum. All right, so I'm going to change my scale just a little bit. I'm going to erase these, and I'm going to simply write it in. You can do it however you want, but I'm going to say pi over 4, pi over 2, so we'll repeat there. 3 pi over 4, and then pi. Okay, go back in. I'm going to put 1, 2, 3 down for my midline, and there we go. The final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see my phase shift. Now, my phase shift says we are going to move pi over 2 to the right. It's always opposite when it's in the parentheses. So normally, I would start here on the y-axis. It's a sine function, and we know that sine is going to increase through that, through the origin. Well, now, that's where I'm going to start my graph. And I know that when I follow this particular point, I know that in a distance of 2 pi, I need to have my pattern repeat, right? And so now, what happens? What's my next little mark? I've got 4 marks that are going to occur between here and here. Well, I know that we're going to have a maximum here, and then we go back down to a midline, then we go down to our minimum, and then I'm going to repeat there. And so at this point, we can simply just fill in, that point, this point should not be in there. Let me get that red back. And I know that when we follow that pattern, we're going to get this graph. It looks like this. Okay, so I know that's a lot of transformations all at one point. There's a lot of lines going on in here. It may be a little confusing, but again, let's just try another example kind of following the exact same things. The first thing that I want to do is I want to plot my midline. Well, my midline here is just -1. So I'm going to go down here to -1, plot that midline. Then I'm going to check my amplitude. Well, here, my amplitude is still 1. There's always that understood 1 there, but that negative is going to flip my graph around the x-axis. So normally, I know that sine or cosine functions start on that maximum. Now with a negative, my sine function or cosine function is going to look like this, unless we have a phase shift, which we do, and we have a period change. So check the period change. We have 2 pi over 2. That's going to simplify to pi. And so I'm fine with this. What's going to happen is I know that my starting point, well, let's get our amplitude lines in here first. It's actually going to be a very small graph. That's okay. So normally we know that cosine would start right here on the maximum. Well, with our phase shift, I need to move that particular point a distance of pi to the left, right? So now we're here, but that negative is going to flip that point down here on the bottom. And so again, just like the previous problem, I know that we're going to just kind of follow our pattern here so that we have a midline, a maximum, back to a midline, back to our minimum. See, our minimums occur at a distance of pi. Well, that's exactly what the period should be. And so you're going to continue filling in that pattern. And so forth. Okay. So again, if you follow these 5 simple steps for graphing sine and cosine, you really shouldn't have any issues. I hope this video helped. I hope you guys feel a little bit more comfortable with them. If not, let me know, and I'm happy to make some more videos and to help out a little bit more. Thanks for checking the video out. I'll see you next time.